Hello, and welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. This podcast is designed to provide that momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. Thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. I'm your host, Eric, and today I have with me Brad Deetscreek. I always think like when I say your name, like the guest name, we should have like a drum roll or some air horns or something fun, Brad. Something fun. You're a fun guy.
Oh, yeah. Especially with the last name, Deetscreek. It's a nice, easy one to roll
Deetscreek.
Yeah.
All right. You're from Pennsylvania.
That's Pennsylvania. Yep.
All right. Well, today, this conversation, we're going to talk about the path to pastoring. Say that 3 times fast.
Path to pastoring. Path to pastoring. I have to say it really slow or else I'll mess it up.
Yeah. Well, Brad, you're a pastor, right?
Yep.
Last I checked.
Yep. Still doing it.
All right. Good
as
for
of
you.
Today.
How many years?
I think it's 26, I think. Something like that.
Dude,
or am I
that's
26
awesome.
or 27? Somewhere in there. Yeah.
You started when you were 4?
Yeah. That's
great.
right. Yeah.
Very cool.
I turned 50 this year. So it's 24 when I started. So yeah.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So let's give context. You're the lead pastor of family ministry.
Right.
So that means what? You oversee?
Oh, that's awesome. So we, in our church, we have different departments. So we have a department that works with our young adults, our student ministries, which is 6th through 12th grade, and then our children's ministry. So anywhere from 0 up through young adults, I oversee those departments. They have their own staff and all that stuff, and I get to work with the best people ever.
So you put out a lot of fires and deal with all the complaining.
Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty fun. I'll be honest with you. I love my job. I love the people.
That's awesome.
I get to work with. It's great. A high trust environment, which is a lot of fun.
Well, Brad, I appreciate what you do and all that you do for the church. Not only are you the lead pastor of family ministry, you've also, the past several years, been our Momentum EDU prof. And so our partnership with Momentum and Grace Church and Grace College, you've been the youth ministry prof at Grace. And the thing that I love most about that is that it's like you're actually in the trenches of church world and you're doing ministry and you understand those family and the youth ministry dynamics. And then you're teaching the students that want to go into ministry and that have a heart for youth, and you're helping equip them. So good job doing that. Now I understand your time with that's coming to an end here, right?
Yeah.
All right. So this is your last school year. That's public knowledge, right?
Right. I think so. Okay. Yeah. Anybody who cares.
Grace College already put out word on it. You're good. Yeah. But you've done a great job. So thank you for serving in that role for the couple years you've been doing driving.
It's a great learning experience, a lot of fun, all those things. And it's I really love Grace College. God is doing some great things out there in Indiana. It's a lot of fun.
And you'll still be involved in like teaching student ministry classes at the Grace Akron, the EDU stuff.
Right, sure.
Very cool. Well, our goal, Brad, for this conversation is as you know, there's a lot of times people wonder, they've prayed and processed about, should I go into full-time ministry? That can be such a challenging, complicated question that for a lot of people, maybe they don't know the answer to. And so our goal today is just to kind of dive into that. If you've ever wondered about listening or being, you're listening to this podcast because you wonder about like being in full-time ministry. In this conversation, we're going to use the word pastoring a lot, but that doesn't necessarily have to mean pastor. You could sub that out for full-time ministry if you want. So we're going to talk through that. Brad, I'd love to just hear your story a little bit, and we'll kind of dive deep. You ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's buckle up. Cool.
All right.
So 23, 24 years pastoring, is that all at Grace Church or where at? Where did you kind of start?
Oh, actually, I started my home church back in Nantiglow. Actually, Johnstown, Pennsylvania is the address. Pike Grace Brethren Church. So grew up there, went away to college and then seminary, and they let me come back. And if they're, I don't know, such great people, such a great time there. So I was a youth ministry. That's what I did while I was there. So it was a wonderful time. And, I think it was like 11 years I was there, something like that. So it was good.
That's awesome. So 11 years there.
So yeah, this must be like going on 27 for me because I'm here this is my 16th year here. So I'll finish up in June.
I was going to say, I'm not good at math. But
I know.
That's awesome. Okay. So then when you came to Akron, what was your role when you came here?
So when I came here, so the Bath campus, so we're a multi-site church. So our Bath campus, I knew Jeff from before and they were looking for a youth pastor, someone to get something started because their church was just booming and they had large children's ministry, and they were just excited about what's next. And I'm very fortunate to have a boss, and Jeff. He has a huge heartbeat for teenagers, and he wanted to see something develop here. So the church has always been that way. It's been something that's invested deeply into that. So I was a youth pastor. That's what I got hired as. So it's the first one here, and I had great volunteers and interns who did it before me. But like being the full time guy, I was the first role here. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. And did that for a while, and then I switched over to family ministry. Dude, I don't even know how long that's been. It's probably been 8 or 10 years. But
okay, that's awesome. Very cool. Now, Brad, I got asked this a lot as a youth pastor. People would always ask me like, "When are you going to be a real pastor?" Do you ever get asked that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like, how does that strike you when people ask you that? Like, what's your thought? How do you respond? What do you give them? Well, I think youth pastors get asked this a lot. Probably worship pastors or children's pastors do too. What do you think?
I mean, I think they're well-meaning people, but I just want to laugh. I'm like, oh my goodness, what's a real pastor look like anyway? I mean, but first of all, let's talk about how fortunate we are to be. I'm very fortunate to be pastoring in our country in the context I'm in, because we have the opportunities to be in diverse roles. I mean, first of all, to get paid to work at a church. I know so many people in our country, in our world, don't get to do that, even in our country, and all those things. So I know there's a bunch of privilege that comes into all of that, but I just want to snicker because it's like, I kind of think I'm pastoring people, and because the role that I look at what I'm doing, I'm working with people. And I really believe, to be honest with you, youth ministry is one of the best places you're going to invest your life. It's like, where else to invest your life than a place where all of the major formative decisions are made in a person's life. I mean, think about all the decisions you make, and you start as a teenager, not even as a kid. You have no idea who you are. You're used to being the friends your parents assigned you, and all that stuff. And then you go to middle school, they split you up into different classes. You're with your sports teams. All of a sudden, next thing you know, you're like, well, who in the world am I? You're screaming at your parents, you don't understand me. And inside, I'm like, I don't understand myself. That whole process. But then it's like, so from 13 to 18, developmentally, we were supposed to have our identity figured out, which now society-wise, it's a lot later than that. But I don't know. I mean, you get to be part of that. Think about that 13-year-old who's just like, voice is still cracking, going to a person making decisions to go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars maybe on an education to go on a pursuit that they're supposed to do for the rest of their life. Yeah. And you can walk with them through that. Well, working with adults and real pastoring, it's like, well, I guess that's fun too, but I love it. But I just want to snicker. I had a guy ask me that one time. He says, when are you going to be a real pastor? I'm like, well, I love doing what I get to do. So
there's so many stereotypes that come along with being a pastor. There have been times where I would tell people like, oh, I'm a youth pastor. You meet somebody at like a coffee shop or restaurant, and they almost like back away from you slowly. Yep. Because there's bad connotations in our culture with it sometimes.
It's the best way to end a conversation. Yeah. Just get to what you do.
What do you do for a living?
I work as a pastor. Well,
see ya.
I think I got a phone call. I got to run.
Yes, honey. You need me to do what? Okay, happy.
And it does have all kinds of wild connotations. And the other one is like the stereotypes that come. Okay, you're a youth pastor. So what do you do the other 6 days of your week?
Yes. Yeah. So you just work on Wednesday night?
So what do you do for a job?
Yeah.
I mean, wait. There's other things you do? I mean, I see you here for like an hour or so. Right. But what do you do how do you make your money?
Yeah. Yeah. Brad, it's so fun just thinking about that. And I'm sure the pastors who are listening to this are like, yes, and they could chime in with their own stories. But in your mind, like biblically, just even let's give context maybe to the listeners who aren't pastors, right? Who don't have, they know those stereotypes. Maybe they're thinking about that, but how do you define maybe to somebody who's not a pastor, what is being a pastor? Well, what does that mean to you?
Oh, that's great. And I'm a simple person. I think all of us as Christ followers have the same mission. It's the Great Commission. When Jesus looked at his followers and said, after he on that hillside or whatever in Galilee or wherever it was, and and they came up there, he's ready to, and rose from the dead and all that. He'd accomplished those things. And he said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Now go make disciples. And and he talks about baptizing them, teaching them to obey everything. And he says, and I'll be with you always to the end of the age. But what I love about that is I think he gives us all the same mission to do. So as Christ followers, we're all doing the same job. Yep. And so we are, every day of my life, I should be thinking about discipleship. I should be thinking about people who have not yet received the hope of Jesus and looking for people that way. Well, I think then what happens, and for some of us, and as we're doing that as individuals, we all have different roles to play in the church. You can read through Corinthians and see that.
Yeah.
But I think for some of us, God gives the opportunity to not only do our own mission, what he has us on, building the church by our own personal discipleship, but looking at ways in which we can mobilize and equip other people to do that more and more so that we can multiply ourselves, but most importantly, multiply the mission of Christ. So I think it all goes back to that for me. So like pastoring, I think is really, it's shepherding people. We know all those things, caring for people, but the whole point is helping them to, teaching them to obey everything that God has commanded so they can get on their mission, making more disciples.
Yeah, that's so good. We actually did a podcast earlier in this season. I just looked it up. It's episode 6 with Katie Cole, who's another teammate of ours. And Katie talked about career and calling. And it's to that same point. This is what Jesus has invited us to be a part of his kingdom's work. And some of us do that through being a business leader, right? But we're all called to point people to Jesus in the lives that we live.
And I probably stole all that stuff from Katie from when we worked together 12 years ago.
There you go. There you go. No, it's so good.
She's wonderful.
If you're listening to this and you want to dive deeper into that, then go listen to that episode.
Yeah, it would be well worth it.
Career and calling. Yeah. All right, Brad. So let's kind of learn a little bit more. Like, what was that process like for you? When did you first realize, like, I think I might want to become a pastor? Like, and then kind of what was that process like after that?
So I would say I took kind of an non-traditional route, but I would call it that. But then the more and more I talk to people, it feels like a lot of people have similar stories. There's more stories out there like this, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. But I didn't really want to be a pastor growing up. I always, I was always taught by my mom and dad loved Jesus. My mom's with the Lord now, but my mom always taught me never give up on people, to love the unlovely, to love the people that other people forget about, to don't throw people out and all that stuff. My mom taught me about loving people. And so that's what I did. And she always also taught me to be willing to stand alone and be who God has called me to be. But growing up culturally as a Christian, oftentimes you just kind of go through the motions, and it's really easy to walk through the Christian life but not follow Jesus. And I found myself at times doing that and making my faith my own. I was a little slow maturing that way. So, I mean, I did a lot. It wasn't like I did a lot of bad stuff, but just you figure all that stuff out. Yeah. But I remember when I was a sophomore in high school at Johnstown Christian High School, there was a Bible teacher who's with the Lord now. Her name was Ann Dybert. She looked at me one day and said, Brad, I think you could be a pastor one day. And at that time in 10th grade, I was like, but I wasn't like, come on, me. I just was shocked that someone saw something in me. I didn't realize how insecure I was until now, as you look back. But I was just like, this woman saw something in me, and at the time, it wasn't because I was the best behaved child. It wasn't. I mean, I was causing teachers some turmoil, and I was just really figuring out all my stuff, but that lady believed in me. And so I held on to that. And I mean, I can still remember the smell of the room. It was so long ago. I mean, like I said, I'm almost 50, that there was still, it was also, our Bible class was also where there's a typing class. So all the typewriters were against the wall. Oh, anyway, so that was, and then, fast forward, I ended up going to Cedarville University, now Cedarville College, studied biology, because I wanted to be a physical therapist. And at the time I was fine walking with the Lord, or I was, I wasn't like rebelling or anything like that. But really, it was during my my junior, going to my senior year, where I started feeling wrestling in my soul. I remember when my roommate invited me to a Bible study one time and things like that. And I really started making my faith, really owning what it meant to follow Jesus. Yeah. And so elementary to what I know now, but where I was at. And my parents told me about Jesus all the time. And I love Jesus and all that, but it's like really owning it. It's like giving him full control of my whole life. And then in my senior year, October, I felt called. I was in a chapel message with Tony Evans was speaking at our chapel. He was wonderful. And he just talked about calling into ministry, and my heart just started wanting to explode. And I'm like, so I didn't know what to do. So I was in time of applying to grad school and all that stuff. But I went home and called my dad, and he said, I don't know what we should do. We should call the pastor. So our pastor, he said, she go to seminary. So I signed up for Grace Seminary, and it was a great experience. But and pastors at the time got MDivs, so that's what I went for, just because that so I just took gradual step by step like that. And then something interesting happened. So I was really excited about Jesus, excited about pastoring. But then one summer I led, which now we call them travel teams, but back at the time, Momentum had, at the time, C National, we had things called Operation Barnabas. And guy TK asked me if I would be one of the leaders for the team. And so as a young adult seminary student, I went and led teenagers, and I fell in love with the idea of working with teenagers. And that has been my passion and my burden ever since. And my identity is really, I found like, this is part of who God wants me to be. I always want to be part of something that shapes the next generation, not because of I want to be known or anything like that. I mean, I'm sure in pride moments I still feel that way. But it was more like, because, man, what an impact can be made. And if I can in any way be part of introducing young people at those years where they're searching, pointing them towards Jesus, the trajectory that could change their life.
Yep.
And man, they get to walk however many years they have them with Jesus. That's what I wanted to be part of. And so that's where it did. And so even still to this day, I think about teenagers, like how to work with them and all that stuff. It'd be weird if I just said I think about teenagers all the time. I got what I say, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, and even like I have my boys, I have a 23-year-old, 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, and now I'm in an 11-year-old who's just in 5th grade. But I mean, it's just my favorite stage of life.
Awesome.
So.
Yeah,
I know it's a long answer. Sorry.
No, that's so good,
There's
Brad.
never anything I do quick.
Well, honestly, though, like I think you're exactly right. Like there are so many pastors that I know that their story is similar.
Yeah,
where it's like, there was like this time where I knew, and then like there was a lot of doubts, and then this happened again, and then I knew, and like God affirmed the decision, and then a door opened, and I became the pastor, and. Like, I don't know, I know very few people that are like, no, in 9th grade, I knew I was going to be a pastor, and that's all I ever did. And it's just crazy to think about that.
I really wish that would have been me, because I did not like organic chemistry, and I had to take it for a whole year. I did not, I spent a lot of time in labs learning bones and stuff like that. Yeah. When I could have been just praying, I guess. I don't know, do something different.
Yeah. The funny thing, Brad, is if I'm honest, I'm one of those guys. Like I realize I'm the unicorn in that like scenario where I like knew I got cut from the baseball team. I couldn't play baseball that summer. So I signed up to go on that same team, travel teams, like what was called Operation Barnabas back then. And God used that summer to call me into full-time ministry. And by the end of that summer at youth conference, I was like, I think I'm going to be a youth pastor. And that was in 10th grade. And ever since I was on that path. Now I for sure had doubts.
Wow.
There were times. Yeah. So like let's talk about that, because I think that's so real. Even if you have a moment where you know that this is the path that God's calling you towards, and maybe you're not like called to be a pastor, but you're called to go into full-time ministry. We say being a ministry professional, right? Getting paid to do ministry. What do you do with those doubts when you have that moment of like, is this the right thing? Maybe when your parents are like, you'll never make money doing that, or whatever it is. What do you do with that? How do you coach somebody that's maybe in that process?
Well, I think doubt is one of those things where we've gotten much better as the church and allowing people to have doubts and allowing people to wrestle them. Because for years, I think we've kind of encouraged people to shove them down, and which has caused a lot of people then to backtrack off of a lot of things. Because even in the Bible, I mean, you see, like, I remember when even like John the Baptist, are you really the one? You know, I mean, from his prison cell. Can you imagine that, being in a prison cell, and it's like, do I really believe what I'm selling? You know what I mean? And I just think about that. And in a world and a calling where we're called to walk by faith and not by sight, trusting something that we can't see, wouldn't it be natural there'd be doubts? But we were reminded of the reassurance we have, just like, then Jesus, how he encouraged John the Baptist, go tell John what you've seen. That's for me. When I have doubts, I'm like, okay, well, why did I step on this way in the first place? What else would I do?
Yep.
Who else am I? I mean, would you, is there a different path you'd rather take? I'm like when the disciples said, well, where else would we go? You have the words of eternal life. Yeah. It's like, I'm like, if it's not Jesus, then what else is And so those are the things that help me. And I think so much it's about our own personal worship with the Lord.
Yep.
Because think about that. when you're committed to the Lord, your identity is shaped in him. Your foundation, your feet are set on something solid. So when the winds and waves come, it's like, whoa, I don't like the wind. But man, it's like, I know there's security in that.
Yeah.
And that helps with so many things, because you are going to get peppered with a lot of things. Doubts are going to come. You're going to have difficult days every time. Every person who goes as a Christ follower will experience trouble.
Yep.
And whether you're working as a school teacher or working wherever, you're going to face difficult things where you're going to say, am I supposed to be doing this? And so we have to have something that we can go back to and say, okay, who am I following? And what I love about that is, so just picture, I memorized a lot of scripture as a kid. I remember the King James versions of a lot of things. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path, right? Oh, the book of Psalms is incredible with the imagery. And I love being outside. And you think about all that. I just think about that light or that lamp lighting my next step as I follow. I think Jesus wants us to follow him one step at a time. Imagine if he came to us and said, hey, Brad, here's where you're going to be in 10 years. Do you know what I would do? I would say, oh, that's awesome. Okay. Or maybe I wouldn't say it. Maybe I wouldn't like it. Maybe I'd be dead. I don't know. Maybe I'd have to fake like, oh, that'd be good. I'll be in heaven. You're
gonna have me do what?
But no, I'd be like, okay, I would try to do all the steps to get there. And I'm not sure I would end up at that spot.
Yep.
But following Jesus, he leads me on the path and he gets me to where he wants me to be. And it's always worth it. The peace and joy I have with him that I know, Eric, you and I have talked where life's not always easy. I mean, all of us have had struggles and trials, but man, the life that we can have in him is so joyful.
Yeah.
But that's how I think.
Yeah.
And it's grounded because it's going to be hard, but I have a bunch of things because I think sometimes we poo-poo ministry a little bit too much. We're too hard on this or say, oh, my job is so much harder than everybody else's job. I think to be honest, we need to man our woman up a little bit and stop. I think that's a little bit of the evil one trying to give us some kind of sense of resilience or something, or reliance on ourselves. But I think we need to stop that. I think we need to understand in this world, we will have trouble following Jesus.
Yep.
But man, when we rely on him, it's amazing what he can do. And he'll have us do things we never thought we could do. They might not be big things.
Yep.
But in a pastor, I've had the privilege, and it's been hard places to sit with families in their worst of moments, but to learn and be encouraged by their faith to see how they've endured this storm. And it's changed me.
Yep.
Places I never would pick to be. Never, because I'm a happy person. I don't even watch sad movies. And if there's a movie where a kid dies in it, forget about it. My kids not even have it on in my house.
Same.
Stay out of here. I don't watch horror movies. There's too much pain in the world. I want to focus on the good stuff. I want to laugh.
There you go.
So
yeah, Brad, I love that, and I'd say let's just follow that, because I have listened to a lot of podcasts in this kind of conversation. We want to be a resource to churches. We want to help people figure out God's calling for their life, and for them honestly to have maximum impact for God's kingdom. And whether that's being a full-time ministry professional or not, if you decide to not be a pastor, that does not mean that you're a lesser than Christian. So I love what you're saying. And yet sometimes in these conversations, there might even be people listening to this podcast and they're like, oh, they're going to talk about how hard it is to be a pastor. Like, Brad, I literally know friends. I've heard people that were like, no, I'm pretty sure I was called to be a pastor, go into ministry, and I never did, because all I heard pastors talk about was how hard it is.
yeah.
And I'm like, that breaks my heart to hear, like, man, so let's go the other way. Like, what are some of the joys that you have? You're starting to go there, like the things where you get put in those positions. You're like, God, I don't know that I have the strength or the wisdom to do this. And then you see him work through you, or you see God do something really cool. Like, share some of that. Like, what are the wins? What are the rewarding parts of being a pastor?
Oh, that's awesome. The joys are, of course, first of all, having a front row seat to what God is doing. And I think all of us get that. But what I love about pastoring is we get to be part of something in building up, and where we can release and motivate people to go, and hopefully they catch fire into their workplaces or wherever they go. I mean, imagine the joy of being able to equip people to go to the places where God has made them to be. Yeah. And we get to be part of seeing what they get to do. I might never ever benefit from the fruit of that person, which I think about so many of us, my church invested in me so many years. They're not getting any fruit from me right now. Sure. Because I moved a state away, right? But they invested in me. But people that I've got to be part of or watch other people be part of as a pastor is a lot of fun. I think another privilege is you get to be with people all the time. And if you don't love people, it's
Sure.
I mean, if you're
You're not saying, I was going to say, clarify that.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're not an introvert because I know some great pastors are introverts. My goodness, some best speakers and stuff like that. You can be an introvert and love people. I mean, there's times where my wife will be introverted, but she is the most intuitive, inquisitive person I know when it comes to people. No, but it's like but if you're just a person who's afraid of people or you don't want to spend time with people or people drain you, it's a hard ride. It would be a hard ride. But I think people is the best part. I mean, think about it. And I always look at like our interns and young people. When I hear stuff like, oh, do I have to go to all the services on the weekend? I'm like, well, why don't you want to?
Right.
Why it's like someone said to me, oh man, I'm sorry you have to work Easter, all those services. I'm like, well, why wouldn't I want to?
I get to see all my friends.
All the people are there. I mean, it's like, come on now. And they look nice too. They're not, they're not grumpy. They're happy that day. They're wearing a lot of pastels, but they're happy.
And you see all the people they didn't see the past year. And
I
you
know.
get to see all those friends again too.
Yeah, those are the most cynical moments, right?
For sure. No, Brad, I love that because like while you and I are the extreme extroverts, right? We also understand, and you're right, we know pastors who are introverted, and yet God uses, so it's not just about like being introverted or extroverted, it's having that heart for the Lord first, and then for his people next, and to reach the lost and to give the hope that we have. And that stuff is a big deal.
And I feel like every relationship I'm in is a mutual learning experience. So as God is using me, and it's so weird to think about that, to help people, equip people, I'm learning so much from them as they show me ways they're reaching their friends or how God is using and working and growing in their life. And I mean, I walk out of my job feeling closer to the Lord and even equipped by people who I get the privilege to serve, that let me be part of their life.
No, that's so good, Brad. So in terms of like, let's, I don't want to go ask the question like, right, what are some of the challenges, but how do you navigate those challenges? Because you kind of already addressed those are real. We all, scripture, I think, what is it? Every book of the New Testament talks about we will go through persecution as Christians, right? So as a pastor, how do you navigate that? What do you do on the day where like life is hard, ministry's challenging? Like, how do you navigate that process?
Well, I think in some ways we should live day by day. Enjoy the day that we're in. Don't get caught up in the past with the shame and guilt. Don't get caught up with worried about the future with anxiety and fear. Live where we are. But at the same time, if all we're doing is going off of the strength of that day or how we feel that day or by our own strength, we're going to struggle.
Yep.
Don't you think like it's what you're doing in the good days when it comes to worshiping the Lord? When things are going great, you're building up that resilience for when tough times come. I think a lot of times people, when you struggle, it's like when things are going great, they forget about God on the mountaintops. And that's what I'm trying. And I do that sometimes too. And it's really hard. So I really try to consider Jesus in every day of my life. One saying I've been trying to say, because I don't always believe it, but I want to believe it, is like when God, like something happens, I'm like, man, God, you're good. But even if that wouldn't have worked out for me, God, you are still good. I try to tell myself that, and I get made fun of in my house for saying it out loud. But I get made. Deets getting made fun of for being bald, I guess.
There you go.
But I think that's what I think it's building and it's following after Jesus, because then you get the strength and the resilience.
Yeah.
And then God uses those difficult times to make you stronger for the good days when they come. It's just how he works. It's just, I mean, you can't make all that. I mean, it's the plan that God has and the way he works through scriptures and how he put the whole package together. I know the gospel is so simple, but man, the intricacies of it all and how it all works and how God uses our trials to sharpen us to become more like him and bring glory from those things, or all things work together for the good of those who are called according to his purposes, it says in Romans. It's amazing.
Yep. The beautiful thing is when you have that perspective, you're not actually just talking about being a pastor. Like that's like being a believer. That's being a Christ follower.
Right.
Because like you're right, we are all going to have trials. And when you shift your perspective to say like, God, you're still good. And even if this doesn't play out, even if that doesn't happen, you're still good. And choosing to see things through that different set of lens where you trust in his, like, in the love that he has for you and the plan that he has for your life and that he's at work in all of this, like that perspective shift is huge.
Because my identity isn't that I'm a pastor.
Exactly.
I'm a believer.
Yep.
All I am is a regular believer
Yep.
that works out my calling as a pastor. That's the role that I get to play. And on all those things, I'm running and training to run this, run a marathon or whatever. Well, imagine if you go to set out to run a marathon, you just show up that day to run, you'll get crushed. I mean, I wouldn't even make it 1 mile if I didn't do any training. But what you do is for 20 weeks beforehand, you start slow and you start going gradual and gradual and gradual. And I think that's how we handle trials. When the trials come, it's have we been growing close to Christ and faithful to him, so when the storms come, as Jesus says, we're built on that foundation.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Let's for maybe the people who are listening to this and maybe they have somebody in their life that they know is kind of on this path towards pastoring.
Yeah.
Or somebody's listening because they're trying to figure it out, right? Mm-hmm. What advice would you give them for people that are considering going into full-time ministry, like that pastoring side? How do you really know that it's for you? Maybe give them kind of those two sides of the coin there.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And that's a question I get, well, how do I know I'm supposed to be called into it? All I can say is keep following after Jesus and try a bunch of stuff. The only way I found out that I like youth ministry is by serving with teenagers.
Yep.
I mean, I tried having a Bible study for my peers. I wasn't really good at it. I like to, I would preach a lot in my church whenever, because we were in pastoral transition, and I like doing that. But I realized it's like leading adults wasn't what got me excited, and I tried serving, like, I'm not very organized, and anybody who's worked with me understands that, but I just smile and they show me some grace, I guess, but they're very kind. People are so good. And I'm not at times, but it's like, I tried a bunch and I realized that's not who I am. And, but just keep trying stuff. So I would encourage you, if you're a young person, don't think, I'm going to do this when I become a pastor. Yeah. Start serving now.
Yeah.
It would be like if I was going to be, to move, people say, well, I want to go do missions afar across the world. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're not doing that in your high school, you're probably not going to do it when you go across the world either. Right.
Yeah.
Because it's not really who you are.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it can't be, but I'm just get serving now, try it out. And I would encourage you, I tell any students I work with, be a free agent, try a bunch of stuff and see what sticks. See where you get affirmation, where people see something in you. Listen to godly people. Who are the people and what are they seeing in you? Yeah. Surround yourself with people who have something that you don't have, experience.
That's
and
good.
Ask them, say, what do you see in me? If you were telling me something, and they're not the Holy Spirit, but God can use them. And that's what he did for me. I still remember that room I told you about from Ann Dybert when I was 15, 16 years old. I'm almost awesome. 50.
Yeah.
So those things I think are important. And then realize it's like you're not always going to get patted on the back for your decisions. Mm-hmm. You might get you're going to get the questions. Well, there's no money in that. Sure. Or you might get questions from your parents or things like that. And you just have to pray a lot. God will give you guidance and work through those relationships. But just keep pursuing him, though.
Yeah, I think if you're open and honest about it and letting people who love the Lord and who love you, let them in on those conversations, asking those questions. But I love what you're saying of finding those experiences too.
And being humble.
Yep.
Don't go into stuff with the idea, I'm going to fix it. I'll show people I know how to do it right.
Right.
So many people just want to fight to get on a platform. Oh man, I just want to preach. I just want to preach. Yeah. I would encourage you to really check your heart if that's you. Not that there's anything wrong. I mean, I think we should desire leadership if it's what's for us, but ask yourself why.
Yeah.
Is that because that's what God's made me do, or do I just want to be able to tell other people what to do? And that's a big difference.
Brad, I'm grinning because it's easy for us as the old guys now in ministry to say that. When we were 20-something, right out of college, I know there were mistakes that I made.
Aren't you glad you didn't have podcasts back then? Aren't you glad you didn't record your sermons on YouTube?
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
Thank goodness, though, for God's grace and for the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
I hold on to that as a parent, too. Thank goodness for his grace.
That's true. That's true. Well, Brad, thank you. I hope to our listeners that this is a helpful conversation. We want to be a resource to you. Honestly, both Brad and I, this is our hearts. If we can help in any way, shape, or form, if we can answer questions, we can pray for you, if we can encourage you, we're here. We reach out. We'd love to be a resource to you in that process of exploring God's calling on your life. And so that's why this whole organization exists. So, Brad, thank you for being a part of this conversation and sharing your heart, being open and honest with us. And we'll look forward to having you on next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, listeners, for tuning in.
Well, guys, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'd be really honored if you went ahead and subscribe to the podcast, and that way you can just kind of stay up to date with the episodes that we're posting in the future. To learn more about Momentum Ministry Partners and our many other resources, please be sure to follow us on social media at Momentum Ministry Partners, or check out our website, www.buildmomentum.org.